Hello, I'm David Rankin, President of Southern Arkansas University. Please join Dr. James Willis for a historic tour of our campus. Founded in 1909, many of the original buildings have disappeared, and I hope you will enjoy recovering the history of this university. Please enjoy the presentation.
Hello, welcome. I'm James Willis, University Historian at Southern Arkansas University. In conjunction with our university's centennial, we'd like to offer you a chance to look back with us at our university's past. We especially want to look at the architecture of the original campus, what I like to call SAU's historic campus. The buildings are gone now, torn down to make room for bigger and better facilities, as our university has grown into the leading school of South Arkansas. The buildings are gone, but the memories remain strong. Come with me as we look back. The Farmers Educational and Cooperative Union successfully lobbied Governor George Donaghy and the legislature in 1909 to establish 4 residential agricultural high schools in Arkansas. Local citizens in Magnolia and Columbia County raised funds to match the $40,000 provided by the legislature to build one of the schools in their community. It was the 3rd District Agricultural School, which students nicknamed TDAS. Initially, 4 buildings were erected, including Old Main, 2 dormitories, and a dining hall in 1910-1911. Student enrollment boomed, and in 1913-1914, the legislature appropriated more funds to build 2 more dorms and a larger dining hall. Let's begin with a visit to the building that served as the heart of the campus for many decades, Old Main. Completed in 1911, Old Main was a 3-story brick building with wooden floors and stairs. Old Main was originally used for administrative offices as well as classrooms, with the largest room upstairs serving as an auditorium for graduation ceremonies, debates, and student plays. The school library was once housed upstairs. There were a number of classes held here. Old Main, through all its years, housed the home economics department. 3 generations of students listened also to professors of other departments in Old Main, where at one time or another almost every course at the school was taught. There was even a wedding ceremony held here in June of 1912, when the first football coach, George Ruford Turrentine, married the domestic science teacher, Lucille Benoit. A little later, in 1918, a creamery was begun in the first-floor basement. Using milk from school farm and from area farmers, they made ice cream during the summer months to sell to confectionaries in Magnolia, Waldo, and surrounding areas. Old Main was constructed on the high point of the campus, which quickly became affectionately known as Aggie Hill, in honor of the 3rd District Agricultural School. Old Main was removed in 1975 to open the broad mall that now stretches from Harton Theater to McGale Library.
We were excited. All the family and everybody was down at the bus station to see us all. We had a long layover in Camden. Then we got to Magnolia about 4 o'clock, and we pulled into the Blue and Gold, a little cafe or bus station there in the crossroads, across from, on the other side of the road from the college. And I got out and looked over there across that big campus. I thought it was the biggest campus, biggest thing I'd ever seen. And Old Main sitting right up in the middle, right up on top of that hill. And I think it was right then that I started getting nervous and homesick.
Old Main was about a 3-story building in the center of the campus. There was no road in front of it, just a walkway, and it was set back from this highway, from the Jackson Street, and was the center building in the campus. And there were boys' dormitories on the west and girls' dormitories on the east. I believe it was McCrary.
What was inside Old Main?
And that's where the classrooms were. We took our classes in that building. And most of the classes were high school classes because 2/3 of the student body were high school students. There were only less than 100 in the junior college, and in my class I think there were less than 50.
Jackson Hall, constructed in 1910, was one of 4 original buildings on campus. Jackson was the slightly larger dormitory. It was a 2-story brick building with wooden floors and stairs. Jackson Hall is named for Mrs. Laura Jackson, the first Dean of Women at TDAS. Mrs. Jackson looked after the female students from 1911 until 1921. During the first year, construction on dorms remained incomplete. Stoves had to be installed in each room for heat because the central steam heating system serving all the buildings was unfinished. Oil lamps were used for light because the electrical system was also not completed. Jackson Hall was used its first 2 years as a boys' dorm, then switched to a girls' dorm in 1914. It remained as such until 1950. Later, when 2 new dorms were built, McCrary for the boys and Caraway for the girls, boys and girls switched in the original dorms so that all the girls would live on the east side of campus and the boys on the west side. There was strict supervision to prevent any out-of-class mixing of the sexes, except for Sunday afternoon dates to walk about the campus. During World War II, some faculty lived in Jackson Hall. Also during this time, there was a Red Cross room devoted to making bandages for the wounded soldiers. President Charles Overstreet and Dean Earl Graham headed countywide Red Cross and War Relief fund drives. Female students participated in these efforts. During the war, students complained of going to breakfast in the dark middle of the night, they joked, when daylight saving time began in 1942, but students eagerly volunteered to work in the Red Cross room in Jackson Hall. The girls of Caraway and Nelson Halls competed to make the most bandages, and on one day in March 1943, together they made 1,315 bandages, helping to meet Columbia County's quota of 30,000 for that year. Jackson Hall was converted to classrooms and faculty offices for the Division of Business Administration in 1955. When business moved to Peace Hall in 1975, Jackson Hall housed the Learning Center for Special Services and Tutoring. Jackson Hall, the last of the original campus buildings, was demolished in 1994.
And of course, Jackson Hall, where I roomed, was next door. It was just a few steps away from Old Main, actually, at the west exit and entrance of our building. And the sidewalk just came right out the door. And of course, Mr. Overstreet could watch us as we went to all of our classes in the armory, to the post office, to the library, wherever he could see us moving about the campus. Jackson Hall also had several faculty members that lived in it at the same time we did. My roommate from Prescott, Arkansas, and I lived in the room right over that overlooked the roof of the porch as you came in to the building. And this gave us the ability to see everything.
What year?
What year? This was 1938 and 39 when I was a student there as a freshman. And we could see everybody cross at Nelson Hall, to our left at the Caraway Hall, everything happening over at Old Main, and all down across campus. We could see everything from there. And of course, that made our room popular because everybody could come and see us. Students today would not believe the rules under which we lived. But it was good for us. It didn't hurt us at all. We survived it. And one of the things that I remember and have to laugh about is that the dean of women had to greet your guests all the time, boys or girls or anything. So if your date came to get you, he had to be nice and talk to the dean. So one of the boys that would come to see me just couldn't, he just thought he couldn't do that. So he got in the habit of picking up a little stone on the way and would toss it and hit the screen so that I'd know he was just a few steps away from the door, so he wouldn't have to talk to Miss Nelson. And because I wouldn't be late, I'd be there. So years later, when I came back to teach full-time there, I was given the office, the same room that I had lived in as a student, was going to be my office now. And I went and looked on the roof to see if the rocks were still there. And they were. They had not eroded during that time.
I was excited in 1968 to have the opportunity to come to Southern State College. I was a young graduate student, and I was hired here as an assistant professor of business. I remember Dr. Ivan Bruce called me on the telephone and offered me $8,040 to come to this university. And of course, the division of business at that time, headed by Mr. Bruce Bevins, was housed in Jackson Hall. And Jackson Hall, I think earlier, had been a dormitory and had been converted into classroom buildings, and the division of business was there. It was a small building, very interesting. In fact, up on the top floor, Dr. Rosemary Vance and Dr. Al Stecker and I had offices up there in one little suite. And they were actually built almost as bathroom stalls, in the sense that the walls did not go all the way to the floor. They went to about a foot from the floor, and then they were open. So you could actually, if you wanted to see somebody was in, you could bend down and see if their feet were showing in the office, and that they would give you the knowledge that they were there. And I've seen a number of faculty members who were locked out of their office would crawl under the partition to get in their office. One thing in particular I remember was the wasp attack every spring. Every spring we would just be inundated with wasps coming through the windows, out of the walls it seemed, and they would be flying around, and that was always our indication that spring indeed had sprung, because the red wasps were there. Quite an experience.
Life in university dorms in the early years of SAU wasn't the same as today. There were a long list of strict rules and regulations. Students were to obtain permission of the principal to leave campus, attend parties, write notes to each other, or to keep company with the opposite sex. Students were forbidden to smoke, drink alcohol, use foul language, or play cards. In the dorms, running, boxing, wrestling, or boisterous conduct were prohibited. Beds had to be made and rooms swept clean each day by 7:30 a.m. Mrs. Ona Westbrook Adkins, a member of the 1911-1912 class, later recalled, "Boys, we couldn't even look at them. Dance? Well, the only way we girls danced was into our rooms at night. Mrs. Jackson would corral us into our rooms because the rules were that we had to be in bed by 9 o'clock with the lights out. Some rules were enforced strictly, others were not. For serious infractions, like sneaking to the picture show, the usual penalty was walking the post. It was adapted from military punishment that involved walking back and forth from point to point an exhausting number of times. Smoking was impossible to stop. Students found an ingenious method of hiding the evidence. A coach and science teacher, Sage McLean, later recalled that when he first came to campus in 1924, the flues of wood stoves used in the dorms before they had steam heat were just then being removed during a remodeling. Found inside the flues, filled to the brim, were cigarette butts and lots of litter. Some things haven't changed. None of the original dormitories are standing. Jackson Hall's twin was Holt Hall. Holt Hall was named for James T.M. Holt, a farmers' union official and the first president of the Board of Trustees, serving from 1909 to 1920. Holt Hall was used its first 2 years as the girls' dorm. It was slightly smaller than Jackson Hall. The principals did not expect to enroll as many girls as boys. Holt Hall switched to a boys' dorm in 1914 and remained such until 1969. Holt Hall then was converted to offices for English and foreign language departments, which remained there until Wilson Hall was completed. It was also used by the Social Science Division from 1970 to 1975, when together with Education, the two divisions moved to Cross Hall. Holt Hall was removed in 1975, about the same time that Old Main was torn down, to open up the beautiful mall that exists on the modern campus. An early dorm was McCrary Hall, constructed in 1913 at an estimated cost of $40,000. McCrary Hall was named for N.C. McCrary of Ashdown, who was second president of the Board of Trustees, serving from 1921 to 1935. McCrary served as a boys' dorm until 1971. Part of the building was used for storage until it was removed in 1975, about the same time as Old Main and Holt Hall. The Brinson Art Building occupies that location today. An addition of 22 rooms was added to the west side of McCrary in 1934, giving it the shape of an L. It cost $18,000 for materials. The labor was free to the college, provided by the New Deal's jobs program, the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. McCrary was closed during the Second World War when almost all male students served in the armed forces. It opened briefly for a few days in 1944 to house a group of conscientious objectors. Their camp, which had been located since 1941 at the present-day Columbia County Fairgrounds, had been destroyed by a tornado. When necessary, former A&M president after the Second World War, Colonel Charles Wilkins, could be a strict disciplinarian. Once, when boys were setting off firecrackers in a garbage can in McCrary Hall, just across the street from the president's campus home, Wilkins rushed out of his front door and quickly put a stop to this so-called fun. He apparently dressed down the culprits in a way an officer might speak to raw recruits, and told them that their fellow students, some of them battle-scarred veterans fresh from combat, would not find their antics amusing. Also constructed in 1913 was Caraway Hall. Used as a girls' dorm until 1950, it became a boys' dorm until 1955. In 1955, Caraway was renovated and used for offices and classrooms for the departments of Education, Social Science, and Art. Caraway Hall was named in 1931 for Senator Hattie Caraway. She was the first woman elected in her own right to the United States Senate. She had first been appointed to succeed her dead husband, as had several women before her, but she was the first to run and get elected on her own. She was assisted in her campaign by the infamous, or famous, depending upon your politics, Senator Huey P. Kingfish Long of Louisiana. Caraway stood beside Long in August 1932 as he spoke to a crowd of 3,500 gathered at the Magnolia Courthouse Square. Long railed against wealthy Wall Street speculators for causing a depression. Thanks to similar campaign stops in other Arkansas towns, Long ensured the success of the first woman elected to the United States Senate.
Oh, the rules were very strict. We had to be in the room by 7 o'clock on school night. And then we had to be in our rooms by 9. If we were in the building and visiting with other girls, we had to be out of that room and in our room. And of course, we had a lot of snack meals after the lights went out with flashlights. We did eat a lot. That was part of being in school, I guess. And one girl was very, very, very wealthy, or at least she had a lot of money, and she would bring candy, boxes of candy, and she took the newspaper, and we'd go in to read her paper. None of the rest of us had a newspaper, but she'd have it. But she was so generous that she just fed us all the time. But a lot of times, as I said, it was after 9, and then on weekends we had a little bit more leniency. I guess it was 10 o'clock probably, I'm not real sure.
I had a couple of cousins that were there that fall, 45, and one of them, Dale Moody, was a handsome young man, but he couldn't get up in the morning. So we had to take time about waking Dale up, and we'd get a towel and dampen it on the end, and we could get him up all right, and you had to be sure he didn't kill you after you got him up with that, popping that towel. But I had a report that after I left in the spring of '46, they called Dale in the bed and they couldn't get him up, so they just took the bed downstairs and put it out in the middle of the campus. And he didn't wake up till about 10:30. Sound sleeper. But whenever he got awake, he was a mighty fine student. I did get disciplined for about 3 or 4 weeks, had to remain on the campus for skating in the dormitory, and I skated up the stairs past Ma Adams' room, and she happened to be there. I went to the room and got in the bed and pulled the cover up. And I imagine my face was red and I was labored in my breathing, and she came in the room right on, hot on my heels, and she said, "That was you." And I said, "Me what?" And I got to spend nearly a month consigned to the campus. Sage McLean was the dean who meted out the punishment.
Constructed in 1926 for about $30,000, the National Guard Armory was a familiar sight on campus. It was a 2-story brick building with wooden floors, stairs, and bleachers. The interior basketball court doubled as an auditorium, with folding chairs moved in each week for morning chapel exercises or programs until about 1946. A stage at one end was for plays. The Armory housed the local units of the Arkansas National Guard until 1976, when the National Guard moved to new facilities. There were a number of extracurricular activities and assemblies in the Armory, including some dances. There was originally strict segregation of the sexes during these events. The old Armory housed offices and classrooms upstairs from 1926 to 1970. For example, among its last classroom uses was to house the beginning nursing program in 1968-1970. Student activities continued to be held there until 2002. Until the Armory was torn down, the campus police department was located there as well. From the time of its establishment in Magnolia in 1920, a company of the Arkansas National Guard provided male students an opportunity to serve the community and earn extra income. In the early years, a guardsman could earn $24 to $75 every 3 months, depending upon rank. The ranks of Company B of the 153rd Infantry were filled mostly by students. A new company was created in 1928, commanded by Captain Edgar L. Watson, an instructor of agricultural engineering at the school. Before the 153rd Companies, led by another agricultural teacher, Vess Godley, entered the Second World War, the most exciting and important duty occurred during one of the nation's greatest disasters, the Great Flood of 1927. The Mississippi and its tributaries inundated large parts of Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Arkansas was the hardest hit, with flooding in 56 counties that forced almost 150,000 people from their homes into refugee camps. Company B was called to duty for 2 weeks in late April to guard levees and help shore up those threatening to break near the city of Dumas. They camped in tents on the levee, surrounded by water, their food brought in each day by seaplane. The Armory was taken down in 2002 to make way for the Donald W. Reynolds Campus and Community Center. The first dining hall on campus was built in 1910. It was very small and soon converted into the physical plant and boiler room for the steam heating system. A second larger dining hall was built in 1913 at the same time as the two dorms, McCrary and Caraway. The dining hall was a one-story brick building with wooden floor. The large interior hall was capable of seating 250 diners at one time. There were additional separate rooms for the kitchen and storage. This building served as the campus dining hall until Nelson Hall was built in 1936. Nelson originally had a dining facility at its east end. Mr. and Mrs. Jesse Bussey ran the dining facility from 1914 to 1922. Mrs. Bussey continued to head the campus dining facilities until 1956. Bussey Hall was named for her. Originally, the men and women sat at separate dining tables. Eventually, men and women were allowed to dine together, and some teachers took this as an opportunity to teach table manners and social graces. Males and females had assigned places at tables seating 6. One girl at the table brought the food from the kitchen and served it. After eating had ended, all diners were supposed to remain seated, engaged in quiet conversation until a bell permitted them to leave. Every few weeks, teachers moved students so that they would become more widely acquainted. A lot of the food served in the dining hall was grown on campus as part of the agricultural program, including the meat, dairy products, and vegetables. The dining hall was converted to the school's first separate library building in 1937 and used as such until Peace Hall was built in 1951. It was then converted to a student union and used until Bruce Center was completed in 1963. Then, the old dining hall was torn down.
We had girls that they were paid to help wait on the tables, and we sat at a table. It was set up just like at home. You put dishes of whatever we had to eat that day on the table, and we just served up plates like we were at home.
Oh, yes, yes. I remember one particular event in that dining hall, since you mentioned it. As my wife-to-be was and we'd eat at the same table every day. And I went in there a little early, you know, I was going to get a good early start. And you won't go in when you got ready, you know, but you stand at your table. Before, you didn't sit down. You had somebody had prayer, and everybody sat down together, you know. But I went in there, and I was my silverware was there on the table, you know, and I was fiddling with that thing, you know, and making a little racket. Wasn't paying attention to it, see. And something tapped me on the shoulder. Miss Bussey, you heard of her, didn't you?
Yes.
All right. She come over there. Said, "You come over here and sit with me at the teacher's table over here." Man, that got me.
Our room was on the second floor, right up in the corner. And it so happened that half that space down underneath, on the first floor, was for the dining room and the kitchen. And our room was right directly overhead. So we knew every day, finally we learned what the menu would be, because it all floated right into our room. I probably, the first one menu I caught on to was that boiled onion and biscuit for supper. Of all the things we had to eat, that was my least favorite. But you know, we had good meals, and we had a good time in there, and we enjoyed it, and Miss Bussey was so nice.
The clubhouse, completed in 1933, was a large one-story log cabin east of the Greek Theater, nestled among pine trees on the southeast edge of campus. It featured a large interior room with an immense sandstone fireplace, a kitchen, and 2 smaller rooms. There was also a porch across the front of the building facing south. Magnolia A&M students built the structure themselves over 2 years, from 1931 to 1933, at a cost of about $1,200. They cut, hauled, skinned, and split all the poles necessary for the log house, and gathered rocks for the huge chimney. It was a present of several classes and alumni who raised funds. Its completion was probably delayed in part due to the worsening of the Great Depression. The clubhouse was used for student activities from 1933 until 1951. These activities included club meetings, dances, parties, banquets, and more. The first school dance ever permitted on the campus was held at the clubhouse on October 6, 1934, due in no small part to the efforts of instructor Sam Dickinson, as well as student request. The first formal dance took place later on January 1, 1935, at the Armory. The clubhouse was little used after 1951, when the former dining hall library was turned into a student union. The clubhouse was torn down in 1962. One of the few historic structures still left intact on campus is the Greek Theater. The stage and columns were built in spring 1936 by Sam Dickinson's ancient history class. The cost was covered by the class of 1936, all of whose names are inscribed on the floor of the stage. A tradition developed for graduating classes to leave behind some permanent addition to the campus. Earlier classes had given sidewalks, a rose arbor, an archway, tennis courts, a log cabin clubhouse for meetings, and street lamps along the east-west road that formerly traversed the campus in front of Old Main and the dorms. In 1937-38, the New Deal's National Youth Administration built the semicircular set of concrete bleachers facing the stage. This provided seating for 700 spectators. The cost was approximately $5,000, paid for by the NYA and the college. The Greek Theater was originally built so Sam Dickinson's class could present a Greek tragedy as a capstone to their course. From time to time since, the theater department has used it to present Greek and Shakespearean plays. For many years, graduation ceremonies were held in the Greek Theater. Students assembled in chairs in the orchestra pit, parents in the concrete bleachers behind them. The stage was lit, everything else was dark. It was kind of mysterious and beautiful. My own graduation was here in May of 1967. I think the last graduation ceremony was in May of 1968. The NYA placed a stone pillar at the arena's entrance with an inscription that inaccurately claimed credit for building the entire structure, not merely the bleachers. Still unique in South Arkansas, 7 decades later, the Greek Theater remained one of only 2 such campus structures in the state. It and the other one, at the University of Arkansas, are both listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The Greek Theater symbolized changes that occurred as Magnolia A&M became a full-fledged junior college in the late 1930s. There was a shift from the agricultural focus upon which the school was founded into other broader areas, including the liberal arts and teacher education. Another structure that has been lost to us was the Model Student Teacher Training Schoolhouse. The Model Training Schoolhouse, a 4-room simple wooden structure, was built in 1927 on the location later occupied by the Bruce Center. Magnolia A&M made an agreement with the Sanders School District north of the college, which sent the children here for classes. Grades 1 through 8 were taught by student practice teachers and supervised by college instructors. It continued until sometime during the Second World War, when the Sanders District merged with Magnolia. Thereafter, student teachers did practice teaching, as today, in area public schools. After the Second World War, The model training school housed the music department until 1957, when the Dolph Camp Fine Arts Building was erected. The model training school was torn down that same year. There were not many places for male and female students to meet unchaperoned in the early days of the college. One of them, however, was an unlikely old pine tree. After the expansion of campus living space from 1913 to 1914, many new trees were planted to beautify the grounds. But on the front lawn, all of the trees but one died. This so-called lone pine tree, standing 100 yards to the southeast of Old Main, would come to have symbolic significance as the site of an early tradition that students created. The aptly named Lone Pine Tree served as a meeting place for dates in the school's early days. I believe it was used because boys and girls could sneak a kiss while hidden behind the tree. Later, because it survived, I feel it became a symbol of long life. Love, pledged beneath its boughs, would, like the tree, survive all the storms and struggles of life. The space near the Lone Pine Tree was also the site of the school's first May Day Festival in 1925. Even though this event had modest beginnings, it eventually grew to be immensely popular, garnering thousands of spectators. Following the May Day ceremony at the Lone Pine Tree, the first college graduate of Magnolia A&M, Ms. Hazel Arnold of Hope, proudly received her diploma. That symbol was finally felled when a storm blew the tree down in February 1956. A special required assembly at 4 p.m. February 21st was held so that faculty and students could commemorate the tree's passing. Alumni later voted to place a marker on the tree's empty spot, but somehow this intention remained unfulfilled. The assembly for the Lone Pine Tree was among the last one ever required. That tradition of required assemblies died at about the same time. Since the loss of the tree, many new pines and landscaping adorn this area of the campus, just to the east of what is now Overstreet Hall.
We hope you've enjoyed this walk down memory lane. Except for this magnificent Greek theater, all of the historic buildings we visited are no longer there. But they will be remembered, not only in this DVD, but in centennial celebrations, where we'll place golden plaques in the ground at the site of their former location. It's interesting to look back at SAU's past, but it's exciting to look forward to our future. Recent construction and plans for new buildings will ensure that Southern Arkansas University will remain the center of higher learning in South Arkansas for many, many years to come. For Southern Arkansas University, I'm James Willis. Thank you for joining me.